The Empire arrives. The Galactic Empire's arrival at Earth was as sudden as it was terrifying. Massive, angular ships darkened the skies, hovering ominously over major cities. The people of Earth stood in shock, staring up at the alien vessels that had appeared out of nowhere. In the heart of the Empire's flagship, Commander Zarn stood on the bridge, his cold eyes surveying the blue-green planet below. Earth, a primitive backwater, according to the Empire's intelligence. Its inhabitants were still confined to their own solar system, their technology laughably antiquated compared to the Empire's might. "Commander, all ships are in position," one of the officers reported. "Ground forces are ready to deploy on your order." Zarn nodded, a slight smirk playing on his lips. This would be over quickly. Earth posed no real threat. Its conquest would be a footnote in the Empire's relentless expansion across the galaxy. "Commence the invasion," Zarn ordered. Within moments, drop ships were launching from the Empire's vessels, streaking down through Earth's atmosphere. The Empire's elite soldiers, encased in advanced armor and wielding weapons that could vaporize flesh and bone, made landfall in the heart of Earth's cities. Panic erupted as the alien soldiers marched through the streets, their movements precise and methodical. Earth's military scrambled to respond, but they were woefully outmatched. Tanks and artillery, the pinnacle of human warfare, were little more than toys against the Empire's technology. The Empire's energy weapons tore through Earth's defenses like a hot knife through butter. Buildings crumbled, vehicles exploded, and soldiers were cut down in droves. It was a slaughter, not a battle. From his command ship, Zarn watched the invasion unfold with satisfaction. The primitive humans were falling before the Empire's might, just as countless other species had before them. Earth would be under Imperial control within days, its resources and people subjugated to serve the Empire's ever-growing needs. As the Empire's troops continued their relentless advance, smashing through any resistance they encountered, a sense of despair began to settle over Earth. The mightiest militaries on the planet had been swept aside with ease. What hope did humanity have against such an overwhelming force? But amidst the chaos and destruction, a glimmer of defiance still burned. In the ruins of a shattered city, a lone soldier looked out over the carnage, his jaw set with grim determination. He was no one special, just another grunt caught up in this nightmare. But as he watched the Empire's soldiers marching through the streets, as he listened to the cries of the wounded and the dying, something inside him hardened. He refused to accept this as Earth's fate. He refused to let some alien empire trample over his home without a fight. Picking up his rifle, the soldier known as Jace Ballantyne, call sign Soldier Boy, stepped out into the rubble-strewn street. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have an army. But what he did have was a stubborn refusal to lay down and die. And in that moment, unknown to Jace, unknown to Commander Zarn, and the might of the Galactic Empire, the seeds of Earth's resistance had just been planted. Part 2. Earth's desperate defense. As the Empire's forces spread across the globe, Earth's militaries threw everything they had into a desperate defense. Jets screamed through the skies, engaging the Empire's fighters in aerial dogfights. Tanks rolled out to meet the alien walkers, their cannons roaring in defiance. Infantry units dug into the rubble of their cities, determined to make the invaders pay for every inch of ground. But despite their bravery and determination, Earth's forces were outmatched in every way. The Empire's technology was simply too advanced, their weapons too powerful. Energy beams sliced through tank armor like it was paper. Swarms of drones filled the skies, hunting down Earth's jets with ruthless efficiency. And the Empire's ground troops seemed virtually unstoppable, their shields shrugging off bullets and explosives as if they were nothing. In mere days, the mightiest militaries on Earth had been reduced to a shadow of their former selves. The United States, Russia, China, their once formidable armies now lay in ruins, crushed under the Empire's heel. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble, their populations fleeing in terror or rounded up by the alien invaders. Amidst the chaos and despair, Pockets of resistance continued to fight, but they were scattered, disorganized. Earth had never faced a threat like this before. There was no playbook for how to fight an enemy that could destroy entire cities from orbit, for an army that wielded technology that seemed like magic. But in the ruins of the fallen cities, a new type of resistance was starting to take shape. Bands of survivors, led by soldiers cut off from their units, were starting to come together. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they knew the terrain. They knew how to survive in the rubble and the shadows. Soldier Boy was one of these survivors. In the days since the invasion, he had managed to gather a small group of fighters around him. Some were soldiers, like him. Others were civilians with a knack for violence. They were a ragtag bunch, but they shared a common goal: to fight back against the Empire, no matter the cost. Their first strikes were small, little more than hit-and-run attacks. They would ambush Imperial patrols, taking out a few soldiers before melting back into the ruins. They sabotaged supply lines, stole weapons and equipment. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As word of these attacks spread, other pockets of resistance began to take notice. Soldier Boy found himself in contact with other groups, trading information and resources. A network was starting to form, a guerrilla army in the shadows. But the Empire was not content to sit back and let this resistance grow. Commander Zarn, furious at the setbacks, ordered a crackdown. Whole districts were locked down, the Empire's troops conducting brutal sweeps to root out any sign of rebellion. Civilians were rounded up for interrogation, or simply gunned down in the streets as an example. The resistance suffered heavy losses in those dark days. Many of Soldier Boy's comrades were killed or captured, and their hidden bases were destroyed one by one. But still, they persisted. They had to. The alternative was unthinkable. In one particularly close call, Soldier Boy's squad found themselves cornered in the ruins of an old factory, Imperial forces closing in from all sides. As energy beams tore through the walls and explosions shook the ground, Soldier Boy knew they were out of options. But just as all seemed lost, a series of massive explosions rocked the Imperial lines. Soldier Boy watched in amazement as a group of heavily armed resistance fighters burst through the factory walls, engaging the Imperial troops in close-quarters combat. Leading the charge was a figure Soldier Boy had only heard whispers about, Captain Alice Novak, the Ghost of Detroit. She was a living legend in the Resistance, known for her daring raids and uncanny ability to strike at the Empire where they least expected it. With Novak and her team's help, Soldier Boy and his squad managed to break free of the Imperial trap. As they fled through the ruins, Novak turned to Soldier Boy with a grim smile. "You've been making quite a name for yourself," she said. "Keep up the good work. Earth needs all the heroes it can get." As Novak and her team disappeared back into the shadows, Soldier Boy felt a new sense of determination. The resistance was growing stronger every day. They were bloodied, but unbroken. The Empire may have sent their best, but Earth had heroes of its own. And they were just getting started. Soldier Boy's guerrilla tactics. In the weeks following his encounter with Captain Novak, Soldier Boy threw himself into the resistance with renewed vigor. His squad became one of the most feared and effective units in the fight against the Empire, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the urban jungle. They focused their efforts on disrupting the Empire's operations in any way they could. They'd raided supply depots, stealing food, medicine, and weapons. They ambushed Imperial patrols, whittling down their numbers and sowing fear in their ranks. They sabotaged communication arrays and power plants, throwing the occupation into chaos. Soldier Boy's tactics were unconventional, but brutally effective. He used the ruins of the cities to his advantage, setting traps and luring Imperial forces into kill zones. He had his team rig buildings with explosives, bringing them down on top of Imperial convoys. They even managed to hijack an Imperial walker once, turning its weapons against its former masters before scuttling it and slipping away into the night. The Empire, for all its technological might, was struggling to adapt to this new kind of warfare. Their soldiers were used to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, not chasing shadows through rubble-strewn streets. Commander Zarn found himself increasingly frustrated as reports of attacks and sabotage continued to pour in. But Soldier Boy and his team couldn't keep up their success forever. The Empire was learning, adapting. They started using drones and scanner suites to ferret out hidden resistance cells. They employed collaborators, human traitors who sold out their own kind for a chance at power under Imperial rule, to infiltrate and undermine the resistance from within. In one particularly harrowing mission, Soldier Boy's squad found themselves walking into a trap. They had received intelligence about a high-value Imperial target visiting a nearby collaboration center. It was too good an opportunity to pass up. But as they approached the center, Soldier Boy started to feel a sense of unease. Something wasn't right. The streets were too quiet, the building too lightly guarded. He tried to warn his team, but it was too late. As soon as they entered the building, all hell broke loose. Imperial soldiers seemed to materialize out of nowhere, energy weapons blazing. It was an ambush, orchestrated by a collaborator who had fed them false information. Soldier Boy's team fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. One by one, his comrades fell, cut down by energy beams or overwhelming firepower. Soldier Boy himself was hit, a searing pain ripping through his shoulder as he dove for cover. In the end, only Soldier Boy and two others made it out alive, fleeing through the streets as Imperial drones buzzed overhead. They had lost good people, friends who had been with them since the start of the invasion. It was a bitter blow, and a stark reminder of the price of their resistance. But even in the face of such losses, Soldier Boy refused to give up. He knew that every Imperial soldier they took down, every supply line they cut, was a small victory. They were bleeding the Empire, making them pay for every inch of Earth's soil. In the aftermath of the ambush, Soldier Boy reached out to Captain Novak and other resistance leaders. They needed to coordinate, to share intelligence and resources if they were going to have any chance of winning this fight. In a secret meeting in the bowels of an abandoned subway station, Soldier Boy met with Novak and a handful of other key figures in the resistance. They pored over maps and intelligence reports, trying to piece together a picture of the Empire's operations. It was clear that the resistance was having an impact. The Empire's timetable for total conquest had been significantly delayed, and they were having to divert more and more resources to dealing with the insurgency. But it was also clear that they couldn't keep going as they were. The Empire was simply too vast, too powerful. They needed to find a way to strike at the heart of the occupation, to cut the head off the snake. As the meeting stretched into the night, a plan began to take shape. It was daring, perhaps even suicidal. But if it worked, it could change the course of the war. Soldier Boy looked around at the faces of his fellow resistance fighters, seeing the same determination and fire that he felt in his own heart. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they were far from beaten. The Empire had sent their best, but they had never faced anything like the indomitable will of humanity. And with leaders like Soldier Boy and Captain Novak, they were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The Empire strikes back. Commander Zarn stood on the bridge of his flagship, his face twisted into a scowl as he reviewed the latest reports from the occupation. The resistance was proving to be far more troublesome than he had anticipated. Despite the Empire's best efforts, they continued to strike at Imperial forces with impunity, melting away into the urban terrain before they could be caught. It was unacceptable. Zarn had been tasked with bringing Earth to heel, and he would not fail in that mission. He would crush this resistance, no matter the cost. Double the patrols in all major cities, he barked at his subordinates. I want checkpoints on every street corner. Anyone caught out after curfew is to be considered an enemy combatant and dealt with accordingly. But increased patrols and harsher crackdowns were only part of Zarn's plan. He knew that to truly defeat the resistance, he would need to strike fear into the hearts of the humans. He needed to make an example of those who dared to defy the Empire's rule. And he knew just where to start. In a series of lightning raids, Imperial forces descended on known resistance strongholds across the planet. They came in overwhelming force, with assault walkers and aerial drones providing cover for the ground troops. The resistance fought bravely, but they were no match for the Empire's onslaught. Their hidden bases were reduced to rubble, their fighters cut down in hails of energy fire. Those who survived the initial assault were rounded up for public execution, their deaths broadcast across the planet as a warning to others who might consider joining the fight. Soldier Boy and his team watched the footage with heavy hearts. They recognized many of the faces of those being led to the chopping block. Brave men and women who had fought alongside them in the ruins of Earth's cities. But even in the face of such brutality, the resistance did not break. For every fighter cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place, driven by a burning hatred for the Empire and a fierce determination to defend their homeland. Soldier Boy's team continued their guerrilla campaign, but the losses were mounting. They had lost contact with several other resistance cells, and supplies were running dangerously low. They were exhausted, battered, pushed to the brink of their endurance. But they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when so much depended on them. In a daring raid, they managed to intercept an Imperial supply convoy, seizing much-needed food, medical supplies, and ammunition. It was a small victory, but a vital one. It bought them a little more time, a little more hope. But the Empire's retribution was swift and merciless. Imperial troops flooded the area, conducting house-to-house searches and rounding up anyone suspected of aiding the resistance. Soldier Boy's team was forced to go to ground, hiding out in the ruins as the net tightened around them. In those dark days, holed up in abandoned buildings and subsisting on meager rations, Soldier Boy often found his thoughts turning to Captain Novak and the other resistance leaders. Were they still out there, still fighting? Or had they been captured, executed like so many others? He couldn't know for sure. Communication between resistance cells was sporadic at best, with the Empire constantly jamming their signals and monitoring the airwaves. But he had to believe that they were still out there. He had to believe that Earth still had a chance. As the days stretched into weeks, Soldier Boy's team continued to strike at the Empire where they could. They sabotaged fuel depots, assassinated collaborators, did everything in their power to keep the flame of resistance burning. But they were being worn down, bit by bit. They had lost too many good people, seen too much death and destruction. Even Soldier Boy, with his unwavering determination, was starting to feel the weight of it all. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they received a message. It was garbled and incomplete, the signal nearly lost in the Empire's jamming, but its contents were unmistakable. It was from Captain Novak, and she had a plan, a desperate gamble. The message from Captain Novak was brief and to the point. She and a handful of other resistance leaders had come up with a plan to strike at the heart of the Empire's occupation. If successful, it could turn the tide of the war. But it was also incredibly risky. They would need to breach the Empire's central command complex, a heavily fortified structure in the heart of the occupied territory. They would need to gather a strike team of the Resistance's best fighters, infiltrate the complex, and eliminate Commander Zarn and his top lieutenants. It was a suicide mission. Even if they managed to get inside, the chances of any of them making it out alive were slim. But if they succeeded, if they could cut the head off the Imperial snake, it might just give Earth the chance it needed to drive out the invaders once and for all. Soldier Boy didn't hesitate. He had known from the moment he received the message that he would be part of this mission. His team, what was left of it, readily agreed. They had been fighting for so long, lost so much. If this was to be their end, they would make it count. The preparation for the mission was tense and hurried. Resistance cells from across the planet pooled their resources, gathering what weapons and equipment they could. Soldier Boy's team spent long hours studying the schematics of the Imperial command complex, looking for any weakness they could exploit. They pored over intercepted communications, trying to piece together the movements of Zarn and his inner circle. The plan they devised was daring in its simplicity. A small team, led by Soldier Boy and Captain Novak, would infiltrate the complex through the sewers. Once inside, they would split into two groups. One would create a diversion, drawing the attention of the Imperial guards. The other would make their way to the command center and eliminate Zarn. It was a long shot, but it was the best chance they had. On the eve of the mission, Soldier Boy found himself alone, staring out over the ruins of the city that had once been his home. The weight of what they were about to attempt sat heavy on his shoulders. So many lives depended on the success of this mission. So many had already been lost. As he stood there, lost in thought, Captain Novak approached. She stood beside him, her gaze also fixed on the horizon. "We're going to do this," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "For everyone we've lost. For everyone who's still fighting. We're going to end this." Soldier Boy nodded, his jaw set with determination. "For Earth," he said. "For humanity." The next day, as the sun rose over the shattered skyline, the strike team gathered. They were a motley crew, soldiers, civilians, even a few former criminals. But they were united in their resolve. They made their way through the ruins, avoiding Imperial patrols, until they reached the entrance to the sewers. As they descended into the darkness, Soldier Boy could feel his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. No turning back now. The journey through the sewers was tense and treacherous. They waded through fetid water, past piles of debris, and the occasional bloated corpse. Every sound, every splash, seemed magnified in the confined space. But they made it through, emerging into the lower levels of the Imperial complex. The first part of their plan had worked. Now came the hard part. As the diversion team set up their charges, Soldier Boy and Novak led their group deeper into the complex. They moved swiftly and silently, taking out Imperial guards with quick, efficient strikes. But as they drew closer to the command center, the resistance grew fiercer. Alarms started to sound, and soon they were fighting running battles through the corridors, energy beams sizzling past their heads. They pushed forward, inch by bloody inch, leaving a trail of Imperial bodies in their wake. But they were taking losses too. Soldier Boy saw his comrades fall, one by one, cut down by Imperial fire. By the time they reached the command center, only a handful of them remained. They were battered, bleeding, barely standing. But they were not beaten. Not yet. They burst into the command center, weapons blazing. Imperial officers fell before they could even reach for their sidearms. And there, at the center of it all, was Commander Zarn. He turned to face them, his eyes widening in shock and rage. He reached for his weapon, but Soldier Boy was faster. His shot took Zarn in the chest, burning a hole right through his black heart. As Zarn crumpled to the floor, alarms blaring and energy beams filling the air, Soldier Boy felt a grim sense of satisfaction. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck at the very heart of the Empire. But the fight wasn't over. They still had to get out, still had to hope that their actions here today would be enough to turn the tide. As they fought their way back out of the complex, past hordes of Imperial reinforcements, Soldier Boy could only pray that their sacrifice had not been in vain. That the people of Earth would rise up, would seize this chance to take back their planet. In the end, only Soldier Boy and Captain Novak made it out alive. They emerged from the ruins of the command complex battered and bloodied, but unbowed. As they looked out over the burning city, they knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The Empire was wounded, but not yet defeated. But they had shown that the invaders were not invincible. They had lit a spark, one that would soon grow into the flames of a global uprising. Earth would rise. Humanity would prevail. And Soldier Boy would be there, fighting on the front lines, until the very end. The tide turns. News of the attack on the Imperial Command Complex spread like wildfire across the occupied territories. In every city, in every town, people heard the whispers. Commander Zarn was dead. The resistance had struck at the very heart of the Empire. It was the spark that the people of Earth had been waiting for. In the days and weeks that followed, the resistance movement exploded in size and scope. No longer were they scattered bands of guerrillas, striking from the shadows. Now they were an army, united and emboldened, ready to take the fight to the invaders. Soldier Boy and Captain Novak found themselves at the forefront of this new resistance. Their names were whispered with reverence, their deeds becoming the stuff of legend. They led raids, coordinated strikes, hit the Empire wherever they were weakest. And the Empire, for the first time since the invasion began, found itself on the back foot. With Zarn dead and their command structure in disarray, they struggled to respond to the swelling tide of human resistance. In the skies above Earth, the Empire's ships found themselves under constant attack from salvaged human fighters and cobbled-together spacecraft. On the ground, their supply lines were cut, their patrols ambushed, their bases overrun. The fighting was fierce and bloody, and the resistance suffered losses. But they were gaining ground, slowly but surely pushing the invaders back. In one pivotal battle, Soldier Boy led a daring assault on an Imperial weapons factory. The facility was heavily defended, with energy cannons and drone swarms guarding its perimeter. But Soldier Boy had a plan. Under the cover of night, a small team infiltrated the factory, planting explosives at key structural points. As the charges detonated, the factory's defenses went offline, creating an opening for the main resistance force. They stormed the facility, engaging the Imperial troops in close-quarters combat among the assembly lines and storage bays. It was a brutal, bloody affair, but in the end, the resistance emerged victorious. The loss of the factory was a significant blow to the Empire's war machine. Without a steady supply of weapons and equipment, their forces on Earth found themselves increasingly overstretched and vulnerable. And as news of the victory spread, more and more people flocked to the Resistance's banner. What had begun as a desperate struggle for survival was now a full-scale revolution, a planet-wide uprising against the Imperial invaders. In the Imperial fleet above Earth, the remaining commanders struggled to maintain control. With reinforcements from the Empire's core worlds still months away, they were forced to rely on increasingly desperate tactics to hold onto their remaining territory. But it was a losing battle. With each passing day, the resistance grew stronger, more confident, and the Empire's grip on Earth grew ever more tenuous. In the end, it was Captain Novak who led the final assault. With a massive resistance fleet at her back, she launched a daring attack on the Imperial flagship in orbit above Earth. The battle was intense. The void of space lit up with the flashes of energy weapons and the explosions of dying ships. But the resistance had the element of surprise, and the Imperial fleet was in disarray. In a moment that would go down in history, Captain Novak's ship rammed the Imperial flagship, breaching its hull and allowing resistance fighters to board. The fighting was brutal, deck by deck, corridor by corridor. But in the end, the Imperial commander had no choice but to surrender. With their flagship taken and their fleet in ruins, the Empire's position on Earth was untenable. In the days that followed, Imperial forces across the planet laid down their weapons and surrendered. It was over. Earth was free. The cost had been high. Cities lay in ruins, millions had died. But humanity had proven, beyond any doubt, that they would not bend the knee to any invader, no matter how powerful. As the people of Earth began the long process of rebuilding, Soldier Boy knew that the fight was not truly over. The Empire was still out there, still a threat. There would be other battles, other wars. But for now, as he stood amidst the cheering crowds, the confetti raining down from above, he allowed himself a moment of triumph, a moment of relief. They had done it. Against all odds, against the might of a galactic empire, humanity had prevailed, and he knew, deep in his heart, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they always had, together, unbowed, unbroken. For Earth, for humanity, forever.